Hello and welcome back to SEOleverage.com. This is episode 75. And today we have a special guest with us, James Scherer from codeless.com. Welcome, James.
Thank you so much for having me. Looking forward to this.
So am I. I was really looking forward to this because we do work with a wide range of clients. But admittedly, we never worked at the scale of some brands you have been working with. One that comes to mind, for example, is Monday.com. And I definitely want to ask you a little bit later about what the difference is on a funded company that can do things on a very much larger scale than the average business can do. First of all, could you give us a little bit of your background and so our listeners can get to know you? Where do you come from? How did you become the vice president of growth for codeless.com?
For sure. Okay. So I started I think I call myself a content writer that navigated that career path somewhat successfully. So I was an English grad, and I kind of graduated into a world that didn't really have much to do for English graduates. So I serendipitously fell into a marketing role that was content oriented as a startup in Vancouver, Canada, and paid primarily in pizza and ping pong. But it was an educational path for me for sure. And that I moved there into my editorial role and then head of inbound, and then moving to Codeless as director of editorial and more recently VP of growth. Yeah, that's kind of my career path. For me, I love the idea of content marketing. I love the pursuit of merit-based attention for clients, and whether I'm in-house or with the agency I'm currently with, there's something noble, or at least more noble perhaps, about creating something that attracts clients and attention to your brand rather than going to them with an advertisement and shoving it in their face. Not there's anything wrong with outbound, but you know what I'm saying. So that's kind of a little bit about me and why I enjoy doing what I do.
Absolutely. I can very much relate. I think we have been doing this agency work for 20 years. I did one sales call. And after the first sales call, I just hung up and said, no, I need them to come to me. I can't do this all day long. And then we've also focused on content marketing, which ultimately has really enabled us to grow multiple divisions, multiple businesses as well. For me, we have in SEO Leverage, we have our own application developed. We have an SEO-based app where our clients can log in and see what's going well, what they should focus on, etc. We combine it with consulting. And obviously, the more the application grows, the more this thought of making this a standalone product and enabling access, making this some sort of SaaS solution available online definitely comes to us. I know you have a lot of experience in this SaaS aspect. You're working with Monday.com. Which is definitely, to my audience, a very well-known name from the project management system. We were on Monday.com before we switched to a competitor at some point. And I know they come up a lot for content marketing, so something they're definitely doing right. To me, it would be interesting. Obviously, Monday.com is a publicly traded company. They have a lot of funding, etc. What would you say is the main difference between doing content marketing as a SaaS company and content marketing as a normal, average, small, medium-sized business?
Would it be difference between like an enterprise level SaaS or SaaS and small?
Enterprise level, probably.
I mean, the main difference between enterprise and startup is the scale of what they're doing. There's Monday.com, so we started working with them about 18 months ago, and we wrote 850 articles in a year. Which is faintly ridiculous. I mean, that's we were writing about 75 articles every month, give or take, and they're all of them were 2,000 words. All of them had custom images, and all of the best practices that we kind of ascribe to good content were in there for every single article. And I think the main difference is that they kind of had a rocket launcher approach to doing content marketing that just write every article there could possibly be. Whereas small businesses legitimately, I think, have a far more targeted, if you don't have the substantial budget that Monday.com has for content alone, you need to be far more intentional with the key phrases that you're going after, the articles that you're creating, and how you're supporting them specifically. Monday.com's approach, which is entirely legitimate for them at their scale, was let's write 850 articles and then stop, review the success that we've had with those articles and then go back in and kind of link them and optimize them for conversion, et cetera. But ultimately, they were just publishing huge amount of content in any given month. I think there's something legitimate in that. I think that something that a lot of businesses miss now is the idea of publishing volume of content and then going back in and optimizing it after the fact. Once it starts ranking, first, second page, you want to, okay, let's make sure that this is good because it's not getting eyeballs on it, or really good and really optimized and or conversion oriented. I think there's also something valuable in being more intentional with the content that you're creating. And that's what I recommend smaller businesses do is let's figure out a content strategy that works within your budget. And then once we determine what we're publishing, how we're going to support it very specifically and very intentionally with secondary content, with internal linking, with external linking, with social media. Like how are you going to make every article give the best possible chance of every article succeeding? Whereas Money.com's approach is let's throw 800 articles into the abyss of Google, and whatever rises to the top, we will care about. So it's a very different approach, but both work.
Definitely interesting. Definitely something I've heard. We work a lot with affiliates as well, and I'm part of affiliate masterminds to see what they are doing, etc. And it's definitely something that I hear all the time, that you just need to increase the volume, and you can really get away, so to speak, with a lower quality of content, just increasing the volume and then going back to those articles that seem to get some traction, and then maybe really rewriting them. So affiliates would probably go and write like 50 articles on their scale. This is a lot, 50 articles a month, probably with AI support these days, with some minor editing, just shooting them out there, essentially making sure every day something new gets published and Google can jump at it, and then a month later, 2 months later, see what has been sticking really. And then maybe even removing the ones that do not get any performance, and then zooming in on those that definitely stick. As someone who is working with writers, in every single day, we have 5 writers on the team. Obviously, 850 articles raises a lot of questions, right? Were these articles written in-house? Did you outsource this? How do you go about writing 75 articles per month?
So when we first got the Money.com contract, we asked them for 6 weeks of prep. And we very quickly, we had 12 or so. So Codeless has about 75 odd freelancers who work for us pretty much fully. And we're pretty much the only company that they work for. Which allows us to do significant volume, but we also have quite a few clients. We have 15, 20 clients, hopefully more in this coming year, but that's kind of where we're at. So when Money.com came along, we said, okay, we have 12 who can write project management-oriented content. And I think we're going to need at least another 8 or so to feel in any way confident that we can hit the amount that you're looking to hit. So we, did our standard job postings on the sites that we post on, primarily ProBlogger for the PM stuff, and then brought those writers in. We have an existing onboarding and training program that teaches them our processes, which are very specific and in-depth and comprehensive. We're a fully remote team, so we need to have a very clear set of a structured process to bring writers into. Here's how you get assigned content. Here's what you expect. Here's what we expect of you for every single individual piece. Here's how it's reviewed. Here's the checklist that you need to be completing, et cetera, et cetera. And here's how it's all delivered. So yeah, I mean, we took about 3 weeks of hiring and 3 weeks of training and onboarding to get those writers up to speed. I mean, they also, they need to be absorbing a significant amount of like branded information, the style guide, the brand guidelines, all of that stuff that Money.com delivered to us to enable our writers to all sound and speak and write with the Money.com voice. So that was very important to us. But ultimately, yeah, it's about getting a lot of talented people, paying them a legitimate wage, salary, and then training them and giving them everything they need to do, everything they need to create great content for a specific brand. It's a lot involved. We have the team. We have dedicated people who do this all day long, every day. So that's kind of the difference between having, an in-house or a content agency. Content agencies are like, this is what we do. This is all we do. Codeless creates amazing content. We don't promote it for you. We don't do lead gen. We create great content that ranks. So when you have a dedicated team dedicated to doing that, they should know what they're doing.
Interesting. Definitely an interesting one. How do you go in these cases about topic selection? So how do you select 850 topics? Where do you start?
Monday.com's content planning process is extensive, as you might expect, and differs significantly from how I tend to do it broad spectrum. So I'll give you quickly their process. They did huge amount of research and competitor analysis. So they identified 10 different businesses that excelled from a content perspective, not competitors, content competitors. What are the brands that are ranking for the thing I want to rank for, the category of content I want to be in? They pulled the ranking key phrases for all 10 of those competitors. And then they did an analysis of, based on, if you've heard like the ICE analysis, it's that times a lot. So it's, what is the kind of intent behind these key phrases? Does that align with what we want to be found for? What is the, in their case, like they did an analysis of like, what is the cost for a paid ranking position for this key phrase? How competitive is this from a linking perspective? And they just included all of these variables, not like it was many variables into essentially a priority score for each individual key phrase. And then that kind of analysis resulted in a significant list that was broken into categories of content. So project management being one of them, task management, because they were expanding into the CRM space, that was one of them. They also did like a versus tech content. So ClickUp versus Monday.com, Asana versus Monday.com, every single possible competitor. They did software category and they did a best of category, so breaking up all those categories and then doing the analysis for each individual topic and prioritizing it from there. So yeah, big process, but they found 800 odd articles that they were happy with, and they're doing fantastically. We drove over 30,000 new, ranking positions for the content we produced. It's hundreds of thousands of visitors, but also, they spent a bunch of money doing it.
I was and they're even now. Obviously, you need to balance it out. I certainly did check out before this call a little bit the rankings. I saw Monday.com coming up and checked it out on our tools and just to have an idea. Obviously, there's an ongoing growth. The more content they publish with the authority as well. So not everybody is going to get their articles ranking with a normal domain. If you're not Monday.com, who's listed from Crunchbase and other really important authoritative sites. This obviously also contributes to the rankings. This is really interesting. What do you think would be something a normal business could take away from an enterprise level content strategy? A part you also already mentioned, to be really focusing on the intent behind the keywords you want to rank for, behind the content you create. Anything else that comes to mind?
Yeah, focusing on the intent behind the key phrases, but also creating a content plan with clear intention. That every article you write has a goal, an internal goal, not just reaching the target reader, but also this article supports this article. This article lives within this category. That category is one we're going after in Q2. That kind of thing, with like the intention behind a content plan. I think a takeaway from what Monday.com did, and this is how I kind of tend to create content strategy, is the category structure. I use a pillar and post content model within categories. So identify early stage businesses, startups, small businesses, identify the 3 to 5 categories of content that you want to be found within. And then within each category, identify 3 to 5 content pillars, and then 20 or so supporting topics, supporting articles for within that category, supporting those pillars. And then honestly, recommendation would be to publish that volume, to invest for the first 3 to 6 months in creating those articles. And then going back in, like Monday.com has done, a lot of other clients do, whether big or small, after 6 months, see what's worked and see what's clicked with Google. And then say, okay, our content plan for Q3 is going to be based on the success we saw in Q1 and 2. So if you see one of your categories, one of your pillars, either ranking or almost right on the first page of Google, and the category itself doing pretty well, then you can say, okay, that's the category of content we're going to focus on. We're going to step back a little bit from the other categories. Google seems to be just clicking. We seem to be clicking with Google for this category specifically. Let's create content within that. So that's kind of what Money.com did at scale. They did those 850 and then had a pause. Okay, let's go back in, let's audit, let's see what's worked, and then let's double down on some of those things that have worked for us. And across the board, that's what I recommend clients do. Not pausing fully, because you need to consistently publish content in order for Google to see you as a publisher. But step back internally, check out what's worked, and then have that inform your content plan, rather than just throwing things without intention, willy-nilly, and seeing what works. Or not even seeing what works, just hoping it works without any real plan behind it.
Yeah, it makes sense. Doing more of what works definitely is something we're high on top. We even have the app developed around those concepts. So the app itself highlights which articles are going up, which articles are going down. So we can really focus on those articles that seem to be resonating with Google, where we say, okay, this is where Google sees our client as an authority, and this is where we can then create more of this content. Clients of ours are probably going to remember the content map they have seen many times, where we try to line up these pillars and supporting articles. So I think we're really very much in line with this. One thing that's always interesting for clients is when they think about content, how does content across different platforms align? So they see content, obviously from SEO, we see content on the website and blog posts and articles and things like those. For clients, content very often means YouTube, social media, blog content, etc. How would you put all these different things together? Can they be put together, or are these completely different things and everything needs to be being dealt with separately?
Ultimately, the idea of content is creating something valuable that attracts people to you. So whether that's on YouTube or social media or on your blog or anywhere, it's about creating something worth seeing. What that means in any given platform differs, but for most SaaS and B2B businesses, it's about education. Very few of these businesses are really creating something that is exclusively just hilarious or exclusively just like about getting, an influencer to wear their hat. It is about like, how can we educate people, because the intention behind content creation, pretty much no matter the platform, is to attract people into a marketing or sales funnel, right? You're talking about tofu content directing people towards MoFu content, directing people towards MoFu content, and a sales call or whatever it is. And I think at the heart of that, therefore, is education, which for me is the basis of content creation. Blog content being kind of the heart of it. Blog content is long form educational content that is related to your business in some clear way. And as such, it is, for me, the jumping off point for all the other content types, all the other content platforms. Creating an educational article that is 2,000 words long and includes best practices and top tips, et cetera, allows you to say, okay, I'm going to use that content, the heart of it, rather than having to go original or like make up my own thing. If I'm the social media manager, or if I'm in advertising or whatever it is, I'm going to say, okay, if this is the foundation of what I'm creating, what can I take from this long form article that I can use on social media? What can I take from this long form article to turn into a YouTube video that clicks and people are and resonates with people? So think of your blog content as, kind of the starting point for all other content types. That said, so like that's, and like, looking at repurposed content it's not a new idea to do this kind of thing. So let me just also give a caveat, which is that while that really, I think it works for social media, I think where it can work for advertising to promote lead gen content that is about education, whatever. Video is somewhat different. There are tools, all the kind of SEO oriented research tools, SEMrush, Ahrefs, Moz, they now do offer search volumes within YouTube. And what we've found, particularly in the B2B and SaaS space, is that a lot of the high volume searches on YouTube or on the video platforms do not align perfectly with content that we would create for blog. And so you can't just do like a straight repurpose of a blog article and have it naturally succeed on YouTube. The content format doesn't really work as well. how you put the video together is not massively helped by long-form blog content. So what I would say is that have a content plan that is devoted to blog content creation, that feeds your social media, possibly feeds your advertising efforts, and then have a different one that shows YouTube search volumes or video search volumes and the keywords associated with that. And if some of the blog content works and can feed that channel, for sure, but don't assume it's going to, in the same way that I really do think that if you write an article on, the 10 best practices for, Facebook advertising, you really can repurpose that significantly into an infographic, into a Facebook post or a social media post or whatever it is that will generate attention. It's not a given within the video space, not anymore.
That's really interesting. We figured out a very similar thing here as well when clients started. Many of our clients have multiple thousands or 60, 100,000 subscribers on YouTube, and also ask us for keyword researches and things like those. At some point, we offered a separate service for the YouTube research, just because it's just a very different animal, right? So figuring out what the competition looks like, what kind of video you should be create, how long should this video be, how should this be like an interview style, should this be like a talking head, should it be an animation video, etc. There are videos, very simple ones. We created animation videos years ago. They're still running and still driving leads, and that's fine. But ultimately, YouTube is definitely a channel that, first of all, deserves its own attention. I believe it's not something that just is something to be repurposed. The same as a podcast. Very often you see people pretty much reading the podcast, their blog articles on a podcast or something like this, which also then is not going to get any traction. But we have also found that video definitely deserves the attention and requires this ongoing optimization, the same as you would do for SEO, for content marketing in general, just to make sure that this really gets traction. And definitely same topic can behave very differently on YouTube. I totally agree.
Quick note on that. I have seen, we brought in a video coordinator last year who now has her own team, and she's excellent, to kind of create content for our clients as kind of an add-on to our standard content production. We implemented videos on one of our clients' optimization opportunities. So existing content that they had that was ranking between 11th and 30th position, like kind of just off the first page. We do a lot of optimization of that content standardly, but we chose to kind of leave the content as it was and add video to those articles. A kind of a synopsis style 1 minute or 2 minute long video beneath the introduction above the kind of the rest of the article. And we did see statistically significant and significant ranking increases for the mass majority of the articles that we did it for. So I think it was like 127% ranking growth. So if they were in 10th, they moved to 5th. If they were in the 12th, they moved to 6th, that kind of thing. So there is significant value in video for optimization of existing written content. So something to test.
Absolutely. What's your take on transcriptions?
I think that they tie very quickly into the idea of AI-generated content. I like them for an SEO perspective, and I think that they have value. Honestly, the only value from a user perspective and from a reader perspective, I don't really rate them. But from an SEO perspective, I think they're a fantastic idea, and every article and everybody should use them. Definitely
interesting one. I have a very contrarian point of view there, and also some data on our client side at least to back this up. So I was telling my clients, and if they listen to this, they're probably laughing because I try to really have a strong emphasis on not using transcriptions as the main content material on the article when there is a video. Yeah. Just because I think if it's not good for readers, it's ultimately not going to be good for Google. We see transcriptions rank on page 5, on page 10. We never see them on page 1. So this transcription, very often, if you can't do anything else and you don't have any resources and you just have this video, my personal opinion is, by all means, put up this transcription and see if this is like going in line with volume, where it's just say, okay, does this stick? Does Google do anything with it? And then if we see some traction and we see this transcription coming up on page 4, page 3, maybe, then we might ask clients to specifically create articles around them. my personal view is really, if it's not good for users, it's not good for search engines. And transcriptions tend to be very repetitive on the same site. This is another issue we have seen with SEO. So if I probably talk about in my podcast, this is episode 75, I probably talk about the same themes very often that are important to me. And I see this on other podcasts. Many of our clients have podcasts and video channels, etc. They strengthen the same themes, what they believe in, their values, etc. all the time. So from a transcription, we see that very often half of it is really just duplicate content Google is going to find everywhere. It's just not well prepared for a reader, because it's just whatever I'm saying. I'm not using complete phrases. I might just stop and switch topic, etc. So we have seen those doing really, really bad. It might be the selection of clients we have access to, but it's really interesting what you're saying there.
Well, I mean, I think as well, from an SEO perspective, I see the value in transcription if you use it as the jumping off point to create an article. Like, we do a lot of interview focused content where, like, we'll get a client, we'll batch topics and do questionnaires, interviewing the client, and then taking the transcription of those calls and turning them into articles. So the thought leadership interview focused article that then we build upon the actual quotes within it, the transcription part of it, into an article. Like, we'll have the question, a bit of their answer formatted a little bit better based on the transcription, and then like an actionable takeaway section beneath it. So I think there's value in the service, and I think that there is, but I think I agree with you. If you're just publishing the transcription straight up, I agree with you. It's not, it's not user friendly. It's not going to increase time on page, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But it can be a valuable asset to create content from.
Absolutely. For us, it's probably the briefing a writer is going to get. So if a client has a video and they say, look, I have created this video and we want to write an article about it, it's going to be the briefing and the first research material, apart from all the other research they're going to do.
Yeah.
They're going to dive into this and making sure that the main points come across, and they are going to use the transcription just for editing purposes, probably. We usually just tell clients, look, if you have a podcast or a video on this page, the podcast and video is an add-on. And it's not, it doesn't have to be related exactly to the text. There are people who want to read are not going to listen to the podcast. The people who listen to the podcast are probably not going to read the entire article. And this is where we try to keep separate. Well, this is definitely interesting. I agree. It's the entry point for further value adding, or whatever you want to call it, right?
Yeah.
How would you go about developing a content strategy? So if I have a site right now, I might have many of our clients come to us and say, look, we have like 200 blog posts. We wrote them over time, and I shared some stuff that was valuable, etc. Not really bringing us any leads, any traffic. How could they go about creating a content strategy?
So content planning works the same pretty much for me across the board. And I've already alluded to it. It's identify the categories of content for which you want to be known, identify the pillars within each category, and the support content that supports those pillars. The pillars need to be excellent, long form, support content, excellent, somewhat more short form. That is kind of the heart of the content planning for me. Where it changes is based on your site's domain authority and the amount of existing content that you have. So if you have existing content, so you have 200 articles, and I do a quick content audit on it, I see where those articles are ranking. As part of the content plan, I might advise optimization of existing URLs, particularly if they're ranking between 11th and 30th position. If they're just off the first page, I can give them a little more love. I can update them, add images, add content, stats, whatever it is, and move them more easily to the first page than I can net new content. Across the board, if a URL has been live for a long time, even if it has no significant referring domains, I still think that URL is more valuable to Google and will have an easier time to start ranking than a net new article will. So I might add optimization to your scope of work, to the monthly content plan. However, if you only have 200 articles, the Pareto Principle is very, very much true in content marketing, which is that 20% of your content is going to drive 80% of your traffic. If you've been writing 200 articles total on your site and haven't been seen a lot, it's entirely possible that none of them are ranking in the top 30 positions for a higher-ish volume key phrase. If that's the case, I would not necessarily delete them, but I would do 301 redirects to new content that focuses on it, or I would just publish new content to that URL. Just straight up delete everything on it, change your blog theme, publish new content on it, so long as it's a live URL. In any given month, it depends on kind of the resources that I have. I would say that most businesses should be creating about 10,000 words of content in any given month at a minimum, because that allows you to a certain extent, throw things at Google and see what sticks. If you do too small volume, it's going to take way too long for you to be able to actually see what's worked for you. And because you need to see what's working for you, so you can double down on it. If you publish too little, too slowly, it's going to take forever, and your boss is going to get tired of the spend that he's doing and not getting any return on investment. So throw some significant budget at it for the first 3 to 6 months, see what's working, prove the value of this, and then you'll have the resources in Q3 and 4, whatever it is, to actually invest in it and see significant growth. So that's the optimization side of things. The last thing I'll talk about really briefly is domain authority. If your site that you're talking about, you have 200 published articles, but your domain authority, because you haven't really been doing a whole lot else, is still significantly low, say less than 50, I would focus my content plan on lower difficulty search terms. So for a domain that has less than 50 domain ranking or domain authority, I would say your pillars should be between, no more than 50 KD within Ahrefs or 60 KD within SEMrush, because they're different. And your support pieces should be less than 35 KD. Basically, what we're trying to do is identify what is realistic for us to actually rank for with both our pillars and supporting content. The idea behind supporting content is as soon as that ranks, which is why I'm saying you should go with a lower competition, even if it's lower search volume, the links, the internal links that your support content is driving towards your pillars are more valuable when that support content ranks. If it's on the first page, then the internal link is more valuable. The link juice is active internally as well as externally. So get your support content ranking, even if your pillars aren't. Make sure that the internal links are well structured and sending towards the pillars, and then consistently publish and then review after 6 months. If your domain authority is higher, say between 50 and 75, then you can go after more competitive key phrases. And once you get 75 plus, the sky's the limit. But for those early stage, lower budget startup kind of businesses, don't worry about starting with low search volume. Focus on getting ranking URLs, period. And because the value of those internal links, it will be so much more and so much more impactful to get and start pushing to other future content and increase that content's chance of ranking, even if there's a target even more competitive search terms.
It's really interesting. We have seen really great success with quite a few case studies here as well. I remember a project specifically, this was a language course, so it just got hit by one of the first core updates, I think, and lost like 70% or so. And the main thing we did with them after auditing their website was really focusing on internal linking and just say, look, you have all these articles talking about different aspects of topic X. Let's make this main article a pillar article. Let's do some internal linking. And they pretty much doubled, tripled traffic in a few months just with this internal linking, because Google suddenly could make sense. And it's also interesting then to see that Google can suddenly rank you for more keywords, the more context you have. So once you put an article in context with another, with an internal link, you suddenly see how this article starts ranking for more keywords. This particular client, I just checked out an article the other day, ranks with one article for 5,000 different keywords, just because the internal linking is so strong. They hardly did any external linking in the initial, I think in the first 2 years or so, but only internal linking. And we just then spread out all those keywords where this main article doesn't rank too well, and just grab them and create specific articles out of those. This is also a strategy that seems to be working really well, where you just essentially create your own supporting content based on where the pillar article seems to be somewhat relevant and really contain the information Google wants to see, but you're never ranking higher than position 15, 20, 25. Once you then look into this, you very often see that Google wants to have a specific article rather than a full featured pillar article about this topic, and has seen proven to be a really good, interesting strategy as well. It's interesting you mentioned the domain authority. We definitely try to make sure clients pick their battles well. So clients might come and say, I want to rank for iPhone this year. Probably not going to happen if you're right now selling iPhone cases in a local town. But yeah, definitely important. And then we also see that very often the supporting content just converts better. So we work with e-commerce sites, but also a lot of sites who just want lead generation from SEO. And those pillar topics very often don't convert well. at least in our experience, because they're just too broad. So people really are not at the stage where they want to take action. You mentioned middle of funnel, bottom of funnel. Very often those are really top of funnel people. They just want to know what this is actually about. And what is this Shopify thing, for example, or what is this Monday.com? What is this actually, and how do I really need a project management system and all those kinds of things? I'm sure Monday.com ranks for this. It's interesting. Those very often don't convert too well. And then you have those specific ones that say, okay, I don't know, where can I sign up for Monday.com, or is Monday.com free? And things like those suddenly then drive the conversions. It's easy to rank. And this is also where we very often, when I audit websites, I see they have some weird rankings, and then I look into this, and it's those help desk tickets they have where they just answer very common questions in their help desk system. We use Help Scout here, for example, or Zendesk, or whatever you might be using. You can add your questions, and those are very hardly ever optimized. So this might be just 2 or 3 phrases answering a specific question people have all the time. And then you see people actually getting traffic through this. This is really interesting. So this is just such a low competition where they can really get into this and get, like you say, the supporting content ranking. And the supporting content, if it ranks on page 1, obviously it means Google thinks it's highly relevant. And the highly relevant article and the links it sends out is always going to be valuable and authoritative.
What's interesting there, really quickly, on back a sec, is the idea of content pillars being not just the high volume searches. I talked briefly about Monday.com doing their analysis of all the different variables that make a priority piece of content or a priority topic. I would say that for me, a key phrase like project management tools or project management software, the intent behind that search is very clearly people who don't want to know what project management is. They're looking for the tools and software that can solve their pain point, their project management oriented pain point specifically. They're looking for lists of tools. That is a far more valuable pillar, even if the search volume is less than project management as a broad scoping 150,000 searches per month kind of key phrase. So when you're doing pillar analysis and identifying the pillars that you want to put into each category, consider the intent behind the search term. Even if the search volume is lower, you're going to, if you get on the first page for that search, for that high intent search, you're going to see far more bottom line changing, stuff than you will if you rank for some insanely high volume search term on the first page.
Absolutely. And all those what is XYZ queries just lend themselves really well for pillar articles, where just introduce this topic, and then you can just keep adding paragraphs whenever you have another supporting articles to just make this happen. It's just a very nice way to work. And it's okay, let's now grab this one and also create a specific article here, the paragraph, provide some context, and Google is definitely going to love it. It's going to drive relevance back and forth, and it's definitely going to do very well. Definitely a very important point to just really make sure that the intention just makes sense and it's just not too far off from an actual potential client in the first place, right? I want to wrap this up very quickly. I just want to ask you one more question. How does content decay play into a content strategy where you see content that is slowly going down in traffic because it becomes less and less relevant? We poke our clients with a stick every few months on important articles to give them a little bit of a fresh aspect or a facelift, so to speak, change a few things, improve a few things, etc. You can see content, if you put it out there, even if it's not a competitive niche, it's going to go down in traffic after a year or two, usually, unless it gets links consistently. How do you go about content decay?
We incorporate content optimization within every scope of work that we have. Usually after about 6 to 9 months of working with a client, if they're doing net new, like totally new content. The other side of that is to focus. Let me finish that thought first, then I'll move on to the next one. Content optimization essentially is we do a constant analysis, performance reporting for our clients, and we identify when individual URLs are ranking have either slipped or are ranking in optimization opportunity positions. Again, between 11th and 30th for more than 250 or 500 search volume key phrase. That with a little bit of love, either because they've slipped, they need a little bit of love, or because they just haven't kind of quite gotten to their potential, they need a little bit of love. A note on that is if a URL has plateaued between 11th and 30th, plateaued meaning it hasn't increased in search in ranking position in more than like a month or so, then it becomes an opportunity. If a URL is relatively new and actively climbing, let it see where it sits. Like wait for it to hit its peak, and then you can come in and optimize it. Don't touch a URL that's climbing actively. If it has slipped, if as you say, like there's decay involved in its ranking position, firstly, identify if the article itself is targeting a non-evergreen topic. We have one client who does financial aid for students, and one of the key phrases that we targeted early on was Biden student loan forgiveness, which was very specific to an individual president talking about an individual thing. It was a current event topic, which is very different from student loan forgiveness, period. Student loan forgiveness is, as a concept, is an evergreen topic that people will always be interested in and have been interested for a long time. So some amount of content decay on your non-evergreen content is to be expected and legitimate. Mm-hmm. Doesn't mean you shouldn't go after those topics, because particularly in the current event stage, like you can rank quickly and drive significant growth for a short amount of time from current event focused content. So if that slips, it slips. There's very little that you can do about that article, unless you've kind of, maybe the URL was actually student loan forgiveness, not Biden student loan forgiveness, and then you can go in and do a full rewrite focusing on the broader general term. But if it is like dedicated to a specific current event, there's little you can do to update it because the thing's over. However, if it has slipped and it is an evergreen topic, you can go in. There are a lot of tools out there. Yours may be one of them. I'm not entirely sure, but like Phrase, ClearScope, MarketMuse, SEO Surfer, a lot of these platforms allow you to drop in your URL, your existing article, with the targeted key phrase. And what those platforms will do will compare what you have done, what you've written, to the ranking competition. And they'll say, okay, you are missing this semantic key phrase, this topic, this subject matter, this amount of word count, whatever. And if you are, basically what that'll do is it'll allow you to see exactly what you're missing. And then when you add it, publish it again, or don't publish again, but like update the piece and then wait a month or so, wait for it to be indexed and then for any kind of change, and then check in to see if what you've done has improved the ranking position of that URL. If it looks like you are optimized in those tools and you're still falling in rankings, then we need to talk about links, internal and external. If your article is on those platforms and to your eye optimized and great and up to date and has all the statistics and is beautiful, then you're slipping because you don't have enough referring domains, enough backlinks, internal or external, which is then when you change from content creation to management of your ranking positions with an agency, a labeled an agency, or your own team, or doing a quick site audit and make sure that you're linked as well as you possibly can be from all your content. That's an entirely different conversation.
Absolutely. That's interesting. We definitely saw this. It's just really almost impossible to keep up with SEO unless you have some machine learning algorithms do some filtering for you these days.
100%.
We were pretty much unhappy with everything we found, and this is when I hired the developer and said, look, we need to build something around. And we keep adding features, and this content decay, we just finished this up where clients can just really see what kind of articles are going down, and we want to check if there is a reason why they go down. If you have how to say Merry Christmas in I don't know which language, obviously it's going to have a seasonality, and we know it's going to come back up automatically, and we want to focus in it a few months ahead. But then you certainly have articles that just run, that just are expiring, essentially. They're expiring, they don't have any value anymore, and then you want to go back. I remember we audited a laptop site, and all the pricing information was from 2 years ago. Obviously, thankfully, Google takes this into account and doesn't rank those pages so well, because otherwise the search would be useless. But there are other topics where clients probably tell me, look, this hasn't changed in 10 years. This is still the same. That's fine. But we definitely see it go down anyway, right? So you just need those tools. Google Analytics does a really bad job, I think. Not sure what your thoughts are. A really bad job with identifying URLs that are going down. You need to do this on a URL by URL basis, which is tedious and impossible. And this is where these tools just definitely come in. The tools you mentioned, Surfer, etc. Our clients definitely know them. Which is just, I think, the basic part of an SEO toolkit these days. Because I used to do those with handwritten notes 15 years ago. I just went through the top 20, top 30 pages and made handwritten notes and then gave them to the client and said, look, produce something that matches all those topics and all those guidelines. This was a long time.
I do not envy you at all of that.
long time ago, thankfully a long time ago. But But yeah, this is really interesting. It's what's really interesting to get your point of view, especially I appreciate you sharing so openly how big brands like Monday.com are doing this. It's definitely fascinating. I sometimes think, okay, if I got a client who says, look, take $500,000, let's make some content, where would I start? And it's definitely interesting how much research goes into such a project, how much intention-based research, obviously, how much planning, where do you want to be in a couple of years, and how does this affect the 850 articles that we have to create right now. Competitive research, obviously, a big part of it. Interesting also the writers, you need the writers to make this scale happen, and scale being one of the main themes. I think the audience is definitely going to take away. So if you create 1 or 2 articles a month right now and don't see any impact, scale might be one of the issues you're facing. And then how you structure this with pillar topics, with supporting topics. We talked about this in other episodes here as well. This is definitely whoever I talk to, the main theme. Topical relevance comes to mind here as well. With all the supporting articles, you essentially start getting eligible for a page 1 ranking with a pillar topic. Then once you build this authority up, so lots of good nuggets. We're going to make a written version, not a transcription here, out of this episode. It's going to be over at seoleverage.com, episode 75 on the podcast there. James, thank you so much. If people want to get in touch with you, how can they best find you?
Yeah, so the site is codeless.io. And honestly, I think, a lot of the listeners are right in the wheelhouse of what we're all about. So honestly, if people want to get in touch with me, just email me, james@codeless.io. I'm more than happy to talk strategy and content whenever I have time, which is, I will make time. But no, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, James.
Cheers.